Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to How to Get Hired. I am Bill, the company's expert, and welcome to the live stream, the weekly live stream where we talk all about resumes, job interviews, careers, getting hired, employment, discovering job opportunities, careers, everything like that. This is also a Q&A, so I'll be taking some questions a little bit later on. But, right off the hop, I want to say thank you to my YouTube channel members, my Patreons, and my super thanks donors. You guys are awesome. And my participants, if you're watching this, know that you're awesome. Hopefully you're here to learn and to do some self-improvement. The title of today's live stream is, if I can find it on my notes, I really should start highlighting things, is second interview questions. How to pass a second interview. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. But first, we're going to be covering briefly how to answer the job interview question, how do you handle stress? Okay, I got asked this again recently, so we're going to take that question. But first, I want to do a shout out to another channel that you guys might find interesting. This is Amory Celeste, who has an interview coach who has a YouTube channel in a similar space as myself, talking about how to pass job interviews, this kind of thing. But she comes from a more psychological perspective. I've got a screenshot here, if I can pull it up. There we go. So check out Amory Celeste, interview coach. She talks about the same kind of things that I do, about how to pass an interview, but she comes at it from a little more of a psychological perspective, whereas I approach this topic from more of a business perspective. She has a more psychological perspective, so check out her channel. And while we're doing public service announcements, also, today I'm starting something a little bit different. I'm doing a collaboration with another YouTuber. This will be over on my second YouTube channel, The Company's Expert 2, which is up on the screen right here, if I can coordinate my hand properly. Check out The Company's Expert 2 later on this afternoon in North America at 3 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. Mountain. I'm doing a joint live stream with another YouTuber, Abby from Life Work Balance, who is also giving advice of how to pass job interviews. So we're going to be talking about how to answer the question, tell me about yourself, and just the generalities of doing job interviews and getting a job and all that kind of stuff. So check that out. It's my very first attempt trying to do a collaboration with somebody else in this space on YouTube. So that should be fun. Either I'm going to make a colossal fool out of myself, or it's going to go awesome, or both at the same time. It is, what's the date today? It's August 26th. Remember, for all you people in the UK, November 5th is rapidly approaching. Guy Fawkes Night. You guys know what that is? That's where they burn an effigy of a guy that lived like 500 years ago. They burn an effigy of this guy all over the UK. It's awesome. It's awesome. People don't do that as much as they probably should. You know, you just make an effigy of somebody. Make like a doll of them made out of straw, like a scarecrow. Put a noose around its neck and then burn it. Right? We don't do that as much as we need to as a society, I feel. I'm sure it's not going to get me into hot water for saying things like this. Anyway, let's talk about second job interviews. We got to talk about the other topic first. You see how I'm organized I am? Okay, the best answer to how do you handle stress? Because I was asked this, I said I would cover it. So you go to a job interview and they ask standard questions of you, right? Tell me about yourself. Why should we hire you? Why do you want to work here? What are your salary expectations? Do you see yourself in 5 years? All these very cliched and annoying questions that everybody always asks. And, you know, you give a super artificial, rehearsed, vetted, censored answer that you've been preparing and rehearsing, right, for all these. But they also have certain other standard interview questions that people don't talk about as much. One of them is this question: how do you handle stress? And I feel that we need to talk about this question because it's another one of those trick questions that's like flying under the radar that a lot of people don't realize is a trick question. They're trying to get the dirt on you, which is a consistent theme of job interviews. And if you've noticed, when they ask you about stress, stress is a negative thing. right? And they're asking you about a negative thing. So it's very similar to the question, what is your weakness? They're asking you about something bad about yourself. So obviously how you respond to this and how you handle it is very delicate, okay? You can't give an uncensored answer. You can't say like, look, stress is hard on everyone. If you're immune to stress, you are beyond a psychopath. Even psychopaths feel stressed. You know what I'm saying? When the pressure's on, and when they fear the future. So, look, stress affects all humans. I'm a human. It affects me. I don't like it. And, you can't just sort of talk about, this no holds barred, because you're in the process of making a first impression. And when you make a first impression, if you start saying a bunch of bad things about yourself, that becomes who you are to the other person. That's the problem, right? So this is a trap, this question. How do you handle stress? So the way you should answer it, in my opinion, and this is an original to me. I got this from, these are one of the questions I got from like a really high-end executive recruiter like 10 years ago. They were coaching me on getting executive jobs and stuff. And like, this is what they said. And it worked really well for me. So that's why I recommend it to others, is you just say like, if they say, how do you handle stress? You say, I handle it very well. And then you stop talking. You see what I did there? I said, I handle it very well. And then I shut up. Like I made a statement, and that statement is a closed statement. There's no more details. No more details necessary. It doesn't run on, unlike a lot of what I say. And then you stop. Just like this, right? And you let them fill the gap in the conversation, right? There's a lot of social pressure in job interviews, and a lot of recruiters will take full advantage of this. If they want you to talk about something and give more information, they will leave a gap in the conversation. And a gap in a conversation with someone that you're just meeting for the first time, it can feel awkward, and you can feel under a lot of pressure to keep talking to fill that gap so it doesn't seem as awkward, right? And they're doing this intentionally. So if you don't want to talk about this topic, and this goes as a blanket principle for like anything they may ask you in a job interview, if they ask you something you don't really want to go into detail about, just say your piece and then stop and let them say the next thing. Usually that turns into them just moving on to the next question they had planned. So you get off this topic, which is what you want to do. Because the thing is, if you keep talking about, all the times you've been stressed and, all the various things you do to manage stress and things like this, you're talking about negative aspects of yourself. They're going to picture you as someone who gets stressed often. If they just met you and you're talking about all the times you were stressed and all the things you had to do to manage stress, that's who you're going to be to them. And that's a bad thing. They're going to think, I don't want to hire this person because they tend to get stressed out. That's the impression I'm left with. Right? So you say, I handle it very well. And then you stop talking. Okay. Now, some other answers I've heard are saying things like, I do various things to manage stress. Right? The problem is now you're lengthening the question. You're taking up valuable speaking time in the interview, talking about negative things. This is what I've done in the past. I've done this, and I've had to do this, and I've done this. And, now you're conveying that, you're a person that gets stressed a lot. That's the impression you're making, right? Now, the other point I want to make with this question is they can ask you another question that sounds very similar to this, but it's a completely different question. And that is, tell me about a time that you've had to handle stress. Okay, that's a different question. So that's a behavioral question. And you answer that question the way you would handle any behavioral question. You tell a success story from your past, and you adapt it to the exact question that they asked you. So in this case, you talk about an accomplishment. You'd answer it in the STAR method, STAR, situation, task, action, result. So I was working in this role. I was given this task. This is what I did. This is how it turned out. It was a bit stressful, but we succeeded. We solved the problem. We achieved the goal. I got commended for doing a great job, and, it resulted in my promotion. The end. That's how I handled stress. I sort of powered through it, got the job done. And what you need to know about me is that I had this accomplishment and I got promoted for it and I was commended for it. That's the impression that you're leaving them with, not the fact that you're just a person that's stressed out. You see the difference? The other point I want to make about this question, a mistake that I feel a lot of people make, is they ask you, how do you handle stress? And you say basically a thing of how you don't encounter stress. You say, well, I tend to be very organized, so I found that if I'm organized, then I don't get stressed out ever. And the problem is you're deliberately circumlocuting their question. You're not answering their question. They're not asking you about how you've avoided stress in the past. They're asking you, once it's upon you, how do you handle it? Because, for example, maybe I'm hiring for a role as air traffic controller, which is known to be a very stressful job. Maybe you're going to be working in a job that is very stressful. Okay, customer service. You've got to occasionally deal with angry, unreasonable people, right? It can be very stressful at times. So don't answer me by saying, "Oh, I avoid stress. I never encounter a situation where there's stress." That's not an answer. What I'm telling you is you're going to encounter stress in this job. What I want to know is, how do you handle it? So don't say something about how you avoid stress even occurring. I found that by being organized, I found that checking my schedule every morning and planning for things, making a solid plan, I can avoid stress. That's not a good answer, in my opinion. Okay? So hopefully that makes sense. That's this nebulous kind of topic around the question, how do you handle stress? Hopefully that makes sense. I see there are 32 people here. Thank you for being here. You guys are awesome. There's absolutely nobody in the chat yet, but that's okay because I'll be taking questions in a little bit. Okay, let's move on to the topic that you've all been waiting for. Second interview questions. What I mean is, when you go for a second job interview, what type of questions are they going to ask you and how do you handle them? Okay. Now, this happens more often than a lot of people would think. There are some jobs where they just do one job interview with you and then that's it. You're hired or you're not hired. It's over. But there's a lot of jobs where there's rounds of job interviews. So there could be 2 job interviews. There could be, I went to I did a video of this years ago. One of the first videos on this channel where I talked about the time I had to do 9 job interviews to get a job. And I got the job, but it was 9 job interviews. Anyway, that's ridiculous, just so everybody knows. That's not normal. That's a wild exception. But doing 2, 3, or sometimes 4 job interviews, especially for very high-paying jobs or jobs that are right up the organizational chart, like you're an executive or a mid-level manager, that's not uncommon. So the question is, how is the second job interview different from the first job interview? And what skills do you need to pass the second interview? Let's dive in. Okay. First thing, if you're going to a second job interview, it could either be with the person that conducted the first job interview with you, or it could be with a different person. Okay. We got to get that out of the way first. Now, if it's with a new person, chances are it's going to be very similar to your first interview, okay? Because you're with a new person. They're probably going to start out by asking pretty much all the same questions again. The standard questions, the future question, the past question, the salary question, all that stuff, right? Okay. So if you pass the first interview with a different person, you're probably going to do okay on the second interview, assuming that you're getting the same type of person. Okay. Now, I suppose the second interview could be with a different type of person. You interviewed with a recruiter, usually the first time. Second time, it's usually with a recruiter, but there may be someone else in the room. It could be a high-level manager of some kind. It could be the owner of the company. It could be other people who contribute to the decision of who gets hired. So it might not be the hiring manager, the person that you would report to if you got the job, but maybe one of their peers or a couple of their peers. Okay. Maybe they brought in somebody from the accounting department. Maybe they brought in someone from the marketing department. You could get other people in there, right? Now, sometimes these people will have a heavy participation and sometimes they'll just be observers. They just kind of sit back, right? But I suppose I better mention, just protocol. If you walk into a job interview and there's several people there that are going to be interviewing you, you shake their hand or you do, your greeting there, your elbow bump or your chest bump or whatever is the cultural way that you greet people in these types of social situations in a work environment, And then what's really handy is if you have a business card, that's great. If you don't, just so you know, you can print these things up for literally $20. You can get a whole stack of business cards. If you have a LinkedIn profile, then you have everything you need to put on a business card. It's just your name, your tagline, right? Like engineer, sales professional, whatever you are. And then your contact information and maybe a little professional picture of yourself in the corner. There you go. That's all you need. And what you do is you give these out to everybody in the room. If you have them in a chest pocket like this, you can just give out your card. And what that is the prompt for them to give you their card. So now you know who you're speaking to. You see their name on their card, you see their title, and it says recruiter. You're like, okay. And the other person says, CEO. And you're like, okay. Right? The other person says production inventory manager, something like that. And you're like, okay. Right? So you know who these people are, and you can position them on the table in front of you so that, if you've got 4 people sitting in a line, right? You put 4 business cards in front of you. So that's Jerry, that's Linda, that's Franklin, and that's Alfalfa, the CEO. Okay. So if you can't remember that person's name, you can look down at the card. And then when they ask you a question, you say, why, thank you, Alfalfa, for that very insightful question. And here's my answer. And you see, top marks. Now, that helps. Okay. So that's just a protocol if you're doing a interview with a lot of people in the room. This helps you get their names straight, and you can refer to them by name. People love that. People love it. It's a sign of respect, and people subconsciously like it when you use their name because it's a sign of respect. It means that I care about you enough to commit your name to memory, and I remember who you are. That's another sign of respect, right? So consciously or subconsciously, people like this. It'll help you endear yourself to them. Okay. Now, knowing who they are, if someone's a recruiter, they're probably going to be looking for certain things in your answers. Whereas if someone is a CEO, they'll be looking most likely for different things in your answers. For example, a CEO will care more about your general attitude and possibly your ambitions. They'll care more about that than more technical details like why are you looking for a job right now? A recruiter would care more about that, right? So knowing who you're talking to really helps. If you're talking to an accountant, that's handy to know because then you can talk in terms of money, right? In my last job, I implemented this change, which resulted in a savings of $52,000 per year for 2 years, something like that. And the accountant will go, I like the cut of your jib, right? So that's kind of some background to this. Okay, so you could be talking to the original person, or you could be talking to a new person. If it's a new person, generally it's the first interview over again. They're going to cover the same material. From now on, we're going to talk about the case where it's the same person again. Okay. So you've already had the first interview with them. They've already gotten answers for the standard interview questions that they most likely asked you. Okay. Now you're talking to them again. What are they going to ask? Well, here's usually how it works. Okay. The first round of job interviews, that's where they take a rather superficial look at you. Okay. They don't really care or remember your, details of precisely why you're, applying for this job or precisely what you can bring to it. They care more about like, what are your salary expectations? Do you have a history of being fired from your job that would suggest that you would likely get fired from this one, or you'd have a higher risk of getting fired? They're looking for stuff like that in the first interview. In the second interview, they're going to want to take a closer look at you. Okay. So they're going to want to go deeper beyond some of the superficial canned answers that you may have given in your first interview. Okay. I wrote down some notes. These are not in any particular order. I'm just going to go through them randomly, just sort of one at a time. Everyone loves that, by the way. Okay, so the fact that you've come back, they've called you back in for a second interview, that tends to suggest a few things. First of all, it suggests that you passed the first round. Okay, that's good. Now, what does that mean? That means that at this point, your resume looks good. It's a pass. Everything you'd written on your resume or original job application, that's a pass. Nothing got you eliminated. Okay. In the first interview, the answers that you gave to the questions they asked you, those were acceptable. So you passed those questions. Okay. That's what it says so far. It also says that the soft skills that you demonstrated at the first interview were a pass. In their mind, those were sufficient. There weren't any red flags with, how you communicated, how professional you behaved and looked. Your grooming and attire was appropriate. You were reasonably likable. Okay, so you didn't fail because they just found you off-putting or in any way, something like that. So that tends to suggest that all of those things were a pass. Okay, so that's what we're going on. Now they want to go deeper. I don't know where I say this. I do actually write that down later on. The big thing here is that remember, if they ask you the same questions again, which they could, you must give a consistent answer. So if you answered one way the first time they asked you, and they ask you the same question again at the second interview, if you give a completely different answer, like that tends to contradict or, you're changing your story in some way, that can be a red flag. So this is where it's important to remember what you said at the first interview. Now, if you're the type of person that you haven't quite got your story straight, you're kind of saying different answers every time you go to a different job interview to see what might work better or something like that, this is where it might be a problem. Okay, as much as possible, if you could remember what you said the first time and you say it again, that will help. Like saying, why did you leave your last job? They may ask you that the first interview, and you may give a reason. Now, if they decide to ask you that question again at the second interview, there's two possibilities. One, they're incompetent and they, forgot that they asked you that or something. Or two, they're strategically, intentionally asking you the same thing again because they're wanting to either go deeper or they're wanting to check your story. So if you were now to give a different reason why you left your last job, they would actively see that as a red flag. Something's not jiving here with this person. They're changing their story. They gave one answer. This was the reason why I left, or this is, I'm currently employed, right now. And then a week later, when they call you in again, you say, oh no, I've left that job. I left it a long time ago. And, I was fired or something, like that's going to be a red flag. Just the fact that you changed your story, not specifically what you said. Okay. In absolute terms. So Number one, consistency. Get your answers down. Don't change your story. Okay. The other danger of the second interview is that if you're interviewing with the same person again, and I've seen a lot of recruiters actually actively encourage this, you may feel that this person now is no longer a stranger. You already know them, and you might be friends, right? It kind of starts to feel like that. They're kind of talking to you more like you're their friend, yeah, we've already met each other. We know who we are. The problem is that they're trying to get you to let your guard down. Now, when they probe you for more information, you tend to, maybe earlier in the first interview, you had your guard up. You were kind of very reserved in what you said. You only said the answer that you had rehearsed and you had vetted. But maybe they ask you again in the second interview. Now it feels like you're friends, you're buddies, you're talking. And now you speak a bit more off the cuff. It's a bit, you're shooting from the hip. It's unrehearsed. You're going into detail that you never planned to say in a job interview, right? This is the danger, okay? Don't fall for that. That's a technique that a lot of people have used. A lot of recruiters use to try and go deeper. They give this false impression that we're buddies. We can speak freely. This is more informal. Don't fall for it. Okay. Keep your guard up. Only say things that you've rehearsed and that you've vetted and or you've thought about in advance. So you're not just talking off the top of your head about stuff. Try and minimize that even in the second interview. Okay. That's a very important point. Okay, now coming back to what are they going to ask? A common thing in a second interview is they're going to ask more behavioral-based questions. Okay, so they got the broad strokes of your background in the first interview. They can see your resume. They might ask basic questions on your resume, like, this job here. You can't see my finger, but I'm pointing down at the resume. This job here, it says here you worked for 2 years doing this, and it says here you did this function. What's that all about? What were your job duties? Tell me about a time that, you had to do this, or give me a typical day, what would you do in a day, kind of thing. So they're asking you general questions about what's on your resume. Okay. And you give general answers. Well, I worked in that role and here was the deal, right? Second interview, they're probably going to want to go deeper. They're going to say, okay, in this role, it says here you worked as this. That's very similar to the role we're hiring for. Have you ever encountered this particular scenario? And if you have, how did you handle it? Right? They're going to want to go deeper. They want the details. They want to see if it says here you know how to do this. Let's see if that's true. Let's ask you a technical question about that. Tell me about an accomplishment you had during that. Tell me about a time you had to encounter this particular situation. Now, if you're like, I don't know, I suppose I did this, that suggests that you're really not that competent and not that familiar with this material. But if they ask you a very specific question and you say, oh, yeah, well, there was a time about 2 months ago where that exact thing happened. This is what specifically occurred. This is what I did, and it was based on this reasoning, and this is how it turned out. And it reinforced the idea that you always should do this first so that you avoid this particular issue on the back end. And that's what I've always tried to conform to. And that was demonstrated right here. That's how I handled it, and it worked out okay. Something like that. And then they think, okay, this person knows their stuff. They're not just saying that they've done this. They're demonstrating that they know how to do this. So that's usually what a second interview is used for if you're talking to the same person again. Okay, that's in a nutshell. The only other thing I'll say about this is that, generally speaking, in a second interview, one common thing that some recruiters will push for or try to get a feel for are, for want of a better word, your values. Okay, like what are your priorities? So within this job, you said you did this particular work. You were in customer service for this type of product. You worked in there for 2 years. Okay, when you're handling customer service calls, what do you prioritize? Do you prioritize customer satisfaction above everything? Do you prioritize, like the length of the call above everything? Basically saying, I will help you out as much as I possibly can, but if we can't resolve this in 5 minutes, it's time to move on, or something like that. Or do you prioritize something else? What's your attitude to, if they start to get defensive or upset on the phone, what's your approach to that? Things like this. They want to get a feel for your values, because different companies and different individuals handle these things different ways, and they want to get a sense for how you would handle it. Okay, so that's a common theme of a lot of second or third or fourth interviews. They like to follow up with things like this and go really deep. Okay, so be prepared for this. And I guess to try and wrap this up, what do you do about it? First of all, be consistent with what you said the first time around. Then prepare even more behavioral interview question answers. So success stories, rehearse these, rehearse saying them in the was it the STAR format? I want to say SWOT. It's not SWOT, it's STAR. In the STAR format, rehearse them so it's nice and compact. And you've rehearsed what you're going to say, so you don't say something that suggests some kind of weird red flag that you might not want to convey. Okay, so you can prepare for those, and you can just rehearse different scenarios, because they will likely ask you about different difficult scenarios, different situations that you might encounter in this role. And you should have answers for how you handle it. What have you done in the past? What are your priorities, your values for dealing with that? And so on. Hopefully that makes sense. That's what I would say. In general, if you're talking to a CEO at the meeting, they sit in on the meeting. They care about your attitude. They care about your enthusiasm for the role. They care about possibly your ambition, like I said. And the last thing I had here was always send a thank you note afterwards. This is not so much because the thank you note works wonders, but it's because you can expect that all the other candidates have sent thank you notes. So the fact that you didn't, that can single you out in a bad way. So just make sure that you've done that. Very simple to do. Just say thank you for the opportunity to interview with you today. I found it quite fascinating. It reinforced my enthusiasm for this role, this particular job, and I'm curious to see where it goes. Should you need anything else, don't hesitate to ask. Other than that, have a good day. Something like that. Very quick. And that's it, really. That's all I have to say, unless people have questions. So I'm going to open it up to questions now. Hopefully that made sense. I see there are 29 people here. Thank you for being here. Doesn't seem like I've put you to sleep yet. So if you see my face, you should see a chat box somewhere nearby, whether you're watching on your phone or on a tablet or a desktop computer, whatever is your instrument of choice. Get in the chat. Let me know what you're struggling with, what you're wondering about, and I will do my best to set you straight and help you out. In the meantime, if you are looking to figure out how to get a job in this current market economy, I have a course that lays it all out for you, and that's that course right here. Get Hired course. There's a link to it in the job description. And this helps you with not only getting hired through standard channels, meaning responding to publicly posted job listings and then dealing with recruiters and all that kind of stuff, but it also helps you tap the world of networking, whether you're an extrovert or an introvert like me. And I'm basically sharing a method that I've used not only to get jobs and things, but to get contract work, to get consulting work. I built a consulting business using this method, connecting with a bunch of people, essentially doing informational interviews and things like that, and then building relationships that way. And it's a different thing than, contacting companies cold. You see, if you put out basically a broadcast of some kind saying, hello, I'm here. I'm talented in this. This is what I do. If ever you need that, let me know because I'd love to work for you. And you just put that out there. Now, most people that you send that to, assuming you're sending it to the right people, they're probably not hiring for someone with your skills right now. But statistical probability is that some of them will be, just as a matter of pure luck. You happened to contact them right as they were looking to hire someone in that role. And those are the people that respond, right? So you could send out 100 of these. You might get 5 responses saying, yeah, let's talk, right? If you put out 1,000, you can get 50, right? It's a numbers game. So it talks about all of that. And for all you introverts out there, this is a great way of using networking to get a job, because then what happens is you're being invited in. It's not like you're forcing yourself on anyone. They've said, hey, we may be looking for that. Let's get together and have a conversation. And it's where they're inviting you in. So it feels like a referral, right? And there's a lot of advantages to this. I've gotten several jobs. I've gotten a lot of consulting work like this. And I've helped many of the students I taught several years ago with this kind of thing. And they've gotten good jobs following this method. And if you still don't believe me on this, do some research on your own about the method that's most commonly used to get jobs. The people who have jobs now, how did they get their job? And what you will find is that something like 70% of them or more, it's more than 70%, it's like 80 or something, but more than 70% of people got their job not by answering a job listing, but by some form of networking. Either they knew someone that worked there, or they asked someone to put a good word in for them, or they met someone that worked there and discussed, whether it would make sense for whether that company needs the skills that you have, or, something like that, some form of networking. Maybe you have a coworker that you worked with, but they've moved on to another company, and then you contact them and say, are you guys hiring? And they put your name for it, something like that. Or you mention that, I know that person, I worked with them, and then the boss goes and asks their opinion of you. And things like this. Some form of networking. And you can do networking on demand if you don't know anybody. This is the beautiful thing about it. You don't have to just know a million people. You can actively go out and create those relationships, and then a lot of opportunities follow. Okay, let's go to questions. Lucky Sprite says, should I prepare a presentation even when it's not expected or required? Well, in theory, it doesn't hurt to be prepared if you're asked to do a presentation. But usually in the context of, I assume this is in the context of like being invited in for a job interview, if they haven't said like you're required to do a presentation, usually they won't then require you to do a presentation. Like they won't surprise you with that once you're there. I've never encountered that where they don't tell you, you're expected to give some kind of presentation, but you show up for an interview and they say, okay, go and present. I've never heard of that. I haven't seen that. Now, if somebody did that to me, that would definitely be crossing the line of professionalism, unless you're getting a job in, where presentation is like a huge part of your job. Like if you're in sales or you're in public relations or something like where you do a lot of presenting, then conceivably, it's nice to be prepared. Obviously, that should come as second nature to you if you're in that industry. But generally speaking, no, I've never encountered where they'll spring on you a fact that you have to do a presentation on something. So beyond like maybe an elevator pitch that's like very simple and quick and easy to remember, I wouldn't go beyond that and prepare a big fancy presentation on the off chance that maybe they want you to do that or something without telling you. The post is like third in command in the org. Okay, well, it depends on how big the org is in this scenario, right? If it's, an organization of 5 people, then that's not really a big deal. If it's an organization of 10,000 people, then that's something else. So that in itself doesn't necessarily mean, it doesn't change my answer, put it that way. if you give me a bit more on that, Lucky Sprite, I'll be happy to respond to. The more I know about your situation, the better I can advise you. B52 Orion Andromeda says, I got scheduled back to back for an interview with 2 teams. Then the hiring manager did that count as a positive vibe going in. Okay, good. That sounds great. Vanessa says, how do you answer the "you lack the specific experience we require" comment? Okay, here's what's going on with that. So the first interaction you have with these people is you send in some form of job application. Usually that includes your resume, right? Now, on your resume, what they do is to determine if it makes sense to bring you in for an interview, they look at your application, right? Now, usually the way it goes, especially in this day and age where it's so easy to apply for jobs that, usually every job that gets posted publicly gets inundated with applications. Because there's so many applicants for a lot of things, the only people that they will end up bringing in for the first round of interviews are people that basically were an exact match on their resume. Okay? So in the job description, usually they list the requirements and they say, we're looking for someone who has this, right? Now, in this day and age, a very common scenario is that the only people that end up getting the interviews in the first round are the people that basically said on their resume or on their application that they had all of those, right? And then there are usually hidden requirements where the employer is familiar with these because they're their wants, wills, and needs, but they don't publicly disclose it on the job posting. So that way they have something that they can use as a true test of whether this person is what we're looking for or not. You see, if they disclosed everything, the problem is that you get a lot of applicants just saying they have all those things, even though they really don't. And then they get brought in for an interview, right? Okay, so that's the problem. So what employers like to do is they like to hold back a couple of requirements, don't disclose them, because we honestly want to see if this person has that when they innocently don't know that we're looking for that. Okay, so the problem is if you get to an interview and they say, I'm sorry, you're not qualified. Now, there's a couple of possibilities. Number one is that they are incompetent and they brought in someone that honestly said on their resume that, I don't have that. You said you needed 5 years of experience in this. Well, nowhere on my resume does it say I've got 5 years experience in that. But you brought me in anyway, like a bunch of tards, and then you tell me, well, I'm sorry, you're not qualified. Well, yeah, exactly. You're wasting my time. I was honest with you, and I didn't pretend to have that, but you still saw fit to bring me in and talk to me just so you can tell me to my face that, my resume shouldn't have been accepted, right? Shouldn't have passed the test. So that's the first possibility. Let's get that out of the way. Second possibility is that they thought you had that requirement based on your application, but after speaking with you, it doesn't really seem like you in fact have that thing. So if you say, I'm an expert at this, and then they bring you in for an interview, like you say, I've got 20 years experience teaching, and then they bring you in for an interview for a teaching job, and they say, so what's your approach to teaching? And you go, I don't know. I mean, I suppose I could do this. It doesn't really sound like you know how to teach, right? So that could be the reason for it. In which case, the problem would be you'd have to work on either having an accurate resume or rehearsing properly for an interview. Everything they put on their resume, they could potentially ask you about. Everything you have on your resume is fair game. Everything that they've listed in the job posting, they could potentially ask you about. They could say, do you have this? Or tell me about a time where you've demonstrated this, right? So you have to get your ducks in a row. So when you go down there, you can speak to all the things that they said they were looking for. Okay. Those are the two most common scenarios. Either they're incompetent and, you never said you had that, or you didn't demonstrate that you really have this thing that you said you had. Okay. Now, the third possibility here is that it's a bluff. Okay. And you are qualified for this thing, but they're telling you that you're not. They say, I'm sorry, you're overqualified, or you don't appear to be qualified in this. You don't have the required skills. Now, once again, if that's what's going on, option A is that they're incompetent and they're just wrong. Number two, the possibility is that you haven't demonstrated that yet at the interview that you indeed have that skill. Maybe they didn't communicate clearly that they were asking you about a specific thing, so you didn't talk about that thing, and then they answer with, well, I'm sorry, you just don't seem to have these skills. Well, okay, I didn't realize you were asking me about that. It wasn't that clear. In which case you would say, oh, I'm terribly sorry. That's actually not the case. I do have a lot of experience and I can demonstrate it. What would you like to know? Or something like that, where you try to fill in the gaps. I don't know what reason I'm on, not the third reason or something, but the other final possibility is that it's an intentional strategic thing to try and get a rise out of you, to see how you can handle those hostile type questions and therefore a hostile type situation. Because some people will get very angry or frustrated and they won't handle it very well. They'll say, well, I'm visibly upset, therefore I'm showing my lack of interpersonal skills. Or they'll just say, well, thank you for your time, and they walk out right there, which the interviewer doesn't mind, because that suggests you probably wouldn't have worked out anyway. If it's a test, you have to keep calm, you have to keep cool and collected and say, oh, I'm terribly sorry. I guess there was a bit of a miscommunication there, and I didn't give a very good impression of my extensive skills in this area. Let me be clear. This thing that you're referring to, I've had several years of dealing with that directly, and I feel pretty confident I can handle any scenario that you guys would encounter when it comes to that. Perhaps you'd like me to go into detail. Is there some particular thing you're wondering about? Something like that, right? So all of these things could be going on. It's hard to say which is the correct one. You have to sort of plan for all of them. The best thing is just to assume that it's a miscommunication. It's maybe to just see how you handle that type of question. So keep calm, keep cool, and, assure them that you have it, and then start backing it up. And if it's too general to back up, just ask them specifically. Say, certainly, what would you like to know? I'd very much like to convince you that I do indeed have that. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. That was a very long-winded answer, Vanessa, but hopefully that gave you what you need. How do you say this? Sithabile? I'm sure it's probably Sitabali or something like that. Says, I'm not sure about a thank you note. Okay, well then don't send one. Lucky Sprite says, okay, I just wanted to prepare. This will be the second interview if ever. Okay, well, I wish you the best of luck, Lucky Sprite. Nana Yaw says, I had a first interview last week and was told I would have 2 more. In the first question, I was asked how I would deal with an angry customer. What would be your best answer, and what should I expect? Okay, if you've never heard of this before, internalize this, okay? Whenever there's conflict, like in the case of an angry customer, there's conflict between the customer and you if you have to deal with them. The blanket solution to any type of situation that has conflict is communication. Okay, so whenever they ask you about, there's a misunderstanding, there's a miscommunication, someone is angry about somebody is, disgruntled, there's an issue with morale, there's an issue with, misinterpretation, the answer is always going to be some form of communication. So in this case, if you had an angry customer, they're right in your face. Okay? If you wanted to do this in a very academic way, this is what I would say. I want to make sure, number one, is that there's no threat of violence. Okay? If we're talking like angry to the point that they could potentially be violent, okay? That's my number one concern. And there are steps you can take to mitigate the threat of violence in the workplace. You can diffuse the situation. Just don't aggravate the person. Give them some space. Don't challenge them. Don't tell them they're wrong. This kind of thing. Just give the impression, first of all, you remove yourself from any danger if that's it. Now I'm going to proceed as if there is no threat of violence in the workplace. It's just an angry customer. This is how I'd handle it. First of all, I'd start out by not confronting them. I'd want to give the impression that, I'm here to listen and I do care about their experience and about their situation, the scenario they're in, and I'm here to help. That's the first thing I would do in that encounter, okay? Make it so that they understand this. And you do that by listening. You do that by sympathizing and empathizing, if possible, with their frustration, with their situation. And then assuring them that, I'm here to help you. I'm going to try and do everything I can to resolve this for you. That's my starting point. And I don't mean I just say this. I mean, I get them to understand this. That's the first step. Then I'm going to listen to their situation. I can't resolve it unless I understand exactly what the problem is. So I'm going to get them to try and calm down. I'm going to sympathize with them. I'm here to help. You can talk to me. It's okay. Let's see if we can get this resolved. And get them to explain. And then, hopefully, now they're starting to calm down. They're starting to, be able to feel optimistic somewhat about the situation. Then I would calmly explain, well, this is what I can do. I could do this or I could do this, if you would prefer. These are my options. These are why these are my options. If giving them information about how things work sometimes helps. But always taking the stand that I'm here to help them. I'm on their side. I want to get it resolved. And I want them to walk away satisfied. So that would be my general approach. You would go outward from there, depending on what the customer said and what specifically the issue was. Okay, so that's how I would handle that. That's what I would say if I was asked how I would handle it. Okay, PKMN Promo says, is it possible to get hired in the US? Yes, it is. I'm not a national resident of the USA and I live in Egypt. Oh, okay. Listen, I am not an expert on immigration issues and work visas. There are specific YouTube channels and a lot of other resources on the internet where people are experts on those particular issues or those issues about immigration and visas for Egypt to the USA specifically. Okay, so they would probably be better at being able to help you with that than I could. I'm not in the USA and I'm not in Egypt. So, and neither am I a citizen of either of those countries. So I would not be the best person to ask. Lucky Sprite says, this jumped on me here again. God, I hate when that happens. Okay, here. It's a major real estate company in the Philippines. I'm applying in the property management position. I got an interview last Wednesday. They called the HR of another business unit who knows me. What? They called the HR to do background. She said I am great for the post, keeping my fingers crossed. Okay, well, best of luck, Lucky Sprite. Your name is appropriate. Matsuki says, I hate those recruitment agencies that have first interviews plus test assessment, pass all of them, then get a second interview where the CEO tells you your rate is expensive based on where you are. Listen, have you ever gone to a store and felt like these prices are too high? I don't feel like I want this product, but I don't want to pay these prices. Have you ever felt that at some point in your life? You see, everybody feels like that, and businesses feel like that, and the individuals inside businesses feel like that too. They will try every trick in the book to get you for cheap because that's what their incentives are, right? If you own a company, okay, And to a similar degree, if you are a manager of a company, okay, they give you money, okay, and you can take that money and use it to pay for an extra employee, or you could take that money and put it directly into your pocket. Obviously, I'm oversimplifying it, but that's the basic concept. Okay. Now, if you're gonna like take money essentially out of your pocket to hire somebody, you want to get a good deal, right? That's a natural thing. Every organization feels this way, whether they say it to your face or not. Okay. Now, I'm not just justifying everything, but I'm saying that everybody wants to get the thing that they're looking for cheap. Okay. So they're going to try every trick in the book. Now, why does a CEO say what they said, in your case, to a candidate's face in a job interview? Why do they do that? I'll tell you why. It's because it's effective. Because a lot of candidates will then say, okay, well, that number I gave you earlier, maybe I could budge on that a little bit. It's negotiable. I'm sure we can figure, and the CEO succeeds in getting that person to come down to a lower number. So it took that CEO 1 minute to save maybe $5,000 a year for the next 5 years, something like that. That's why they do it. Now, you're faced with a couple of options here. It depends on how well you know your own value, okay? If you honestly don't know your own worth, or you're asking for way more money than you are in fact worth, okay, in this role to these people, okay, you're going to lose one way or another. Either they won't offer you the job, or they'll haggle you down and you'll have less compensation, okay? However, if you know what your worth is, and you have a very accurate determination of how much you're worth, and you are worth, in fact, the higher number, then it will make sense, generally speaking, to stand your ground. And one way or another, you will win, okay? If you stand your ground and they don't offer you this minimum wage job or something, that's no big loss, because you will get hired very shortly thereafter somewhere else. Okay? Or you stand your ground and the CEO is bluffing and they know that they're bluffing. So they say, okay, fine, we'll pay your price. And then you win, right? Okay, that's what's going on. That's the sort of background to this. Everybody behaves this way. Some people are a little more brazen at saying it right to your face. Some people don't mention it at all. Some people they'll mention it, but they'll do it in a very professional, respectful way. So you get all kinds, right? But the problem is, generally speaking, when you're starting out, when you're at the worker level at the bottom, you're going for entry level roles, the primary thing that people compete on is price, right? That's just the reality of the lower, jobs that are fungible, jobs that are one person is the same as another. You need a warm body to help carry boxes. You don't care who it is. It's not a question of what they can bring to the role carrying boxes. I just need a person to carry boxes. So the primary way I decide on who I'm going to employ is going to be on things like, how much do I have to pay them, right? If you climb the ladder, you get to a higher level, it goes away from that and it turns into more of what can you bring to the role, That's where that stuff matters more. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. You're welcome, Vanessa. Matsuki says, my wife encountered an interviewer that got too hostile because she said, we can't lower Google charges per kilowatt, if I got that right, or your cloud hosting business as it is fixed. He just forced it by saying, so how to lower it? Okay? The interviewer was the CEO with a high ego. Well, it's kind of hard to be a CEO with a low ego. If you think that you're a failure and you think that you're no good at anything, it's kind of hard to direct a business to success. But I think, look, I don't know. I wasn't in the room. Okay, so what do I know? I don't know who this person is. But you may be just falsely concluding they have a high ego, when all they're doing is they're using some high pressure negotiation tactics. Okay. Now look, maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this person was just a jackass. Hey, it happens. There's a lot of those. If it's just high pressure negotiation tactics, what I'm telling you is that it's to your advantage to learn how to counter those. Okay? It's not just someone being a jerk. It's a tactic that you're going to encounter. It's reasonable that you can expect this in a lot of different things where you're trying to get them to pay you a lot of money or whatever the situation is. You're going to be pushing for as much money as possible. They're going to be pushing for as little money as possible. And you're going to do this, right? It may not always be peaches and cream. It may involve people saying awkward things if you don't know how to respond to them professionally. Okay? So that's all I'm saying. Just, it may be worth your while to bone up on how to negotiate and especially counter some high pressure tactics. The big question I have is we can call each other names and stuff. This person's got a high ego. Everybody can do that. That's fine. But who won? Did they win or did you win? Now, if they won, and either they didn't pay your high price or something and they got what they needed cheaper somewhere else, I don't think they're really regretting it. You know what I'm saying? So that's why it's to your advantage to learn how this stuff works. And next time you go in there and you deal with a jackass like this, they try all these silly little high pressure things and you stop them dead each time. Say, no, sorry, that doesn't make sense for me. And you never lose. One way or another, you never lose. And you make them squirm and feel awkward about it. Okay, FundMe M says, what do you do if feedback from a second interview says your answers were not in-depth enough? Well, okay, look, if they've said, I'm sorry, we are not hiring you, we are moving on with other candidates, and this is the reason, you don't have to say anything. The odds are is that any reason they give you for why you were not selected, the odds are is that it's first of all going to be a lie. Usually it's like a sanitized kiss-off answer. It's something that sounds benign enough. It doesn't make them look like a bunch of jackasses, which they could be. Maybe they didn't hire you for a really horrible reason. Maybe there was something, maybe even illegal involved in why they didn't hire you, but they're not going to say it. They're always going to say something very benign, okay? Now, there's no way for you to know what the real reason was, okay? So the only thing you can do with this information is it's useless as a single data point. But if you start to notice a trend, if every job that you're rejected for, they always give the same reason, then you can start to consider whether that might be true. If they always say, I'm sorry, you're not a good fit, or you didn't have the right attitude, or you're overqualified. If they always say the same thing, then you can start to consider it. Okay? Now, if they've said this, but you haven't been eliminated yet, then once again, it's like playing poker with somebody. Just because your opponent tells you, they're trying to push you to do something, trying to persuade you to do something. It's usually not to your advantage to do it if they're if they're trying to get some advantage. Like, for example, on negotiating salary, right? You have conflicting goals. They want to pay as little as possible. You want them to pay as much as possible. So doing what they want you to do on that issue is usually not the correct strategy for you. You know what I'm saying? Okay, so what did they say again? Your answers were not in-depth enough. Well, did they mention this during the interview? Did they say like you gave an answer and they said, okay? A great thing to do is when you give an answer to a job interview question, okay? They ask you a question, you give an answer, you end with a question back at them and say is that kind of what you're looking for? Or, is that typical of the way things work in this organization, something like that, right? So there's an opportunity for them to say, well, we were hoping you would speak more about this other thing. And you go, okay, yes. And then you speak about that thing. So you give them the answer that they said at the time they were looking for. And if you end that by saying, is that kind of what you were looking for? They'd say, yes. Yeah, that's pretty good. You're like, okay, right? That's a helpful tool. Sometimes that'll work. It takes all kinds. Usually you just get people that are idiots and they're jerks and they say these things that they're not true. They didn't like you or something, or you didn't. Maybe they're looking for people that are easily brainwashed, and you came across as someone who can really think for themselves and can question and can think critically about things. You're not just a pawn, and they didn't like that. You're an independent thinker. They don't like that. They want people they can control. And maybe that's why you're rejected. If that's true, then it's a good thing. Don't sweat it. Just keep moving. There'll be more opportunities. There's a lot of things out there. Even now, there's a lot of things out there. If you know where to look, okay, you'll get the next one, and it will work out better. This was a blessing in disguise. KW is keyword. Okay, so listen, don't use acronyms when you're talking to me. I'm talking to people all over the world in every industry. I don't know the industry lingo plus internet lingo. I don't have it all loaded into my head. It's just not possible to get familiar on every possible acronym. So as a general rule, when you're talking to somebody outside of your little group or your little work group or something in your industry, don't use acronyms if it's the first time you're saying it. Okay, it's a good general rule. I talk about things like that in that course right there, which I highly recommend to anyone who's wanting to move up the ladder and get promoted into, say, a management position. That's very important. How to communicate. It's called Write Like a Professional, but it's not really about writing. It's mainly about what to say. So that's for people that are looking to do that. It'll greatly help you with your prospects of moving upwards, if you're interested in that. Okay, Matsuki says, yes, they may do, is what Matsuki says. Yes, they will be doing a tactic. Thanks to him, I'm starting my own company. Okay. Well, good. Good. I applaud people who start their own companies. Starting your own company and learning business, how to make money directly yourself without going through an intermediary, like an employer, to make your living or make your fortune, is super commendable. It's also good in the sense that it gives you more security because you're not dependent on anyone to make your money. You generate the money yourself. There's a lot of advantages to that. Sober ZML. Yes, I say Z because I'm in Canada. None of this Z business for me. Make sure you say zebra. You sound like you do not sound like an idiot when you're in a group with a bunch of Americans, right? I use your trick past one interview. Great. Just why I hire you video. Okay, good. That's great to hear, Sober ZML, and I'm glad you're sober. It really helps if you're going to do job interviews. It really helps you get the most out of my videos too. If you can chug like a bottle of vodka or something and then watch my videos and then get something out of it, that's impressive. Okay, we're at the end of the questions so far. If anyone has any more questions, get in the chat. Let me know. There are 31 people here watching. Thank you for watching. You guys are awesome. I hope you're getting something out of this. Presumably you are, or you wouldn't be here. Or you'd be in the comment section, but you'd be saying a lot more nasty things than people have been saying. This afternoon at 3 p.m. Central Time in North America, I will be doing a new thing that I've never done on my channel before. It's actually on my second channel, The Company's Expert 2, which is right here, if I can coordinate my hand properly. The Company's Expert 2, that's the name of my other channel. I'll be doing a live stream with another YouTuber in this space, with Abby from the channel Life Work Balance. And she gives advice on how to pass job interviews and things like this. Unlike me, I come at this from more of a business perspective. She comes at it, I believe, from a more psychological perspective. So check that out. We're going to be doing a joint live stream where we talk about the question, tell me about yourself, how to answer it, and we're going to be discussing it. So if you feel like tuning in for that, check out the Company's Expert 2. And we're just gonna do this. I have no idea how it's going to go. It's my first attempt at doing this kind of thing. Hopefully it'll be cordial and hopefully it'll be productive. But you never know. That's the excitement of doing things live, right? You never know. My chair could explode and, it would be a lot more interesting than we thought it would be. Matsuki says, sorry about the shortcut. I got a character limit. Oh, okay. Yeah, no problem. Not a problem, Matsuki. It's not a problem at all. Joe Star says, hello, I watch your videos once in a month. Really interesting stuff from a legal advisor at the Netherlands. Well, thank you. The Netherlands, right? Like Holland, the Low Countries. What is the capital of the Netherlands? Is it Amsterdam? Holland? I used to know this and I forgot. I can't believe I forgot. I'm just drawing a blank. Anyway, there's Rotterdam, there's Amsterdam, there's several cities in there. But anyway, no, it's cool to hear from someone from the Netherlands. You guys rock. Did not participate in World War I, but really participated in World War II. Rebecca says, love your videos. They're very insightful. Thank you, Rebecca. You are awesome. All you guys that are here are awesome. Amsterdam. Okay, it is Amsterdam. Excellent. I thought so. Oh, The Hague. Yes. The Netherlands is The Hague. That's the capital. That's what I was drawing a blank, like the Hague Convention. Yes. Yeah, Rotterdam is the port city. I remember the original book of Shogun. They made like a couple of different series about it. But the original Shogun, the ship, the first ship that supposedly got to Japan from the alliance between England and Holland, came out of Rotterdam. That's where it sailed from. So, yeah. Anyway, there's a piece of random trivia of it that I'm sure nobody cares about, but I think it's cool. Yes, so it looks like we're reaching the end of the questions. So I do this live stream every week. So if you do have questions, check out this live stream. Anything about job interviews, careers, resumes, that kind of stuff. How to get hired in different situations, how to get hired for different types of things. That's what I talk about here, and I answer questions. So this is the way to get me to answer a question, is to tune into this stream. And as a reminder, if you are trying to get a job right now and you feel lost, you feel like you don't really know what to do, you're applying to stuff, but it's not really going anywhere fast, and you're just unsure about the whole process or where the jobs are or how you make this process workable. If that's you, check out this course, my Get Hired course. It's where I've taken all my advice, all my principles, where I kind of explain the entire system, and I put it into a kind of a step-by-step sort of course program. And with templates and all this kind of stuff, we talk about how to get hired through standard channels, which is what a lot of people are familiar with, where you just respond to a job posting on the internet, and then you talk to recruiters and then you do job interviews. We talk about that, but we also talk about how to get hired through networking on demand, where you get access to all the jobs that are in what they call the hidden job market, which for some reason people don't like that term. It sounds nefarious. It sounds like it's some conspiracy or something. It isn't. Don't take my word for any of this. If this is all new to you, go do your own research. You will see that the vast majorities of jobs that are out there that exist are not posted publicly. You can't put yourself forward for them by looking at job listings online, like Indeed and LinkedIn, because they haven't posted the jobs publicly. I could go a lot deeper into this, but I do in the course. Okay, so I lay all that out. I show you how you can do this if you are an extrovert or you're an introvert like me. I built a consulting business by following this exact method. And I show you how you can do it to get a job. I've gotten jobs, I've gotten contract work, I've gotten all kinds of things by doing this, and it has helped a lot of people. And I used to teach some of this stuff in university, and these techniques helped a lot of my students to get jobs and all that kind of stuff. So if you're interested in that, I lay it all down here in this course. It's called Get Hired. There's a link in the description box under this video. And I made a video that also goes into detail describing how the course works, what it teaches you, what you get. So it's as transparent as possible. So there's no surprises. If that's of any interest to you, check out the link, get the course. It will help you cut through the clutter and get hired quickly in a job that makes sense for you. Okay. Other than that, I will be back in a week with another episode of How to Get Hired, and I will be on the air this afternoon in an hour and a half on the Company's Expert 2, doing a live stream with Abby from Life Work Experience. So check Life Work Balance. So check that out. Thanks a lot. You guys are awesome. I wish you nothing but the best, and I will see you soon. Take care.